Hello, everyone. After multiple delays because either I had technical difficulties with my computer or I felt like shit because the weather has been weird, I won't get into too much detail about what's been going on with my personal life because you're not here for that. You're here to listen to me discuss a Star Wars novel. Now, sorry for the delay. This probably won't get the attention I would like it to have, but it was originally going to be at 2:30, but I delayed it to 10:30 because I woke up late and I didn't want to be scattered brain when I did this discussion. So, Children of the Jedi. This novel has an interesting This novel has a interesting reputation. What the fuck is wrong with me? Interesting reputation amongst fans. There's those who claim this is one of the worst abominations to ever come out of the EU. There's some that is like, it's whatever. And then there's those like myself, it's like, wow. Interesting. Now, I'm just going to give my honest thoughts about this novel. I'm not going to sugarcoat what I like and dislike about this book. This came out a few years after the Jedi Academy trilogy, or is it a year? I don't know at the exact moment. If I get some minor things wrong, forgive me for that. I'm recording this late. Anyway, this novel came out basically in the golden age of the expanded universe. So some of the ideas that you would see in like later Star Wars stories, interesting enough, were actually built here. Ironically, what's considered one of the worst Star Wars novels by fans, a lot of the building blocks for future stories started here. That's the thing I find interesting about the EU. Some novels that are divisive or not liked by fans was the building blocks for a lot of stories that came afterwards. Whether it's the Jedi Academy trilogy by Kevin J. Anderson or Children of the Jedi. Now, what is Children of the Jedi exactly? So you may be asking. Now, the title for the novel is deceiving. You're led to believe that the novel, when you read it, the book is about searching for children of the Jedi, which are descendants of Jedi who survived the Jedi Purge. Mind you, this was written before the prequels. So anything that this novel may have gotten wrong I cannot hold it against the author. After all, this was published in the mid-1990s. It'd be a few years before The Phantom Menace would come out. And not to mention the pre-Clone Wars era of Star Wars, nothing was known about it. Hell, the Clone Wars era as a whole, not many people knew about it. And some of the dates may seem off. The Children of the Jedi is actually referring to one of the antagonists in the story, who is a daughter of a Jedi, who was one of Palpatine's concubines. Yeah, for those of you who probably are wondering, wait, Palpatine fucked? Apparently Palpatine had multiple mistresses, which I could totally see it, considering the kind of person that he was. I could totally see it, though. The idea is creepy within itself. I'm sorry. And one of the antagonists, her son, it's not really stated or it's not answered one way or the other if he is Palpatine's son. I mean, this wouldn't be the first story that alluded to Palpatine having a child. I mean, I haven't read these novels in a long time, over like almost 30 years at this point. But in the Jedi Prince series, you had another character that was basically the son of Palpatine and the grandson of Palpatine as well. But I'll get into that if I ever talk about the Jedi Prince series, which I probably will not for a while. So I basically pretty much spoiled like the ending of the novel, but that's not all there is to it. I'm just saying that the title is very deceiving. And if you were to listen to the audiobook of Children of the Jedi, the novel in it, you would miss out pretty much on pretty much 90% of the story. And for those of you who do not know, just for those who haven't listened to audiobooks from this era, audiobooks in expanded universe materials that was released in the 90s, all of them were abridged without exception. There wasn't one novel that did not get the abridged treatment. Some did not suffer as badly as others. But for this novel's case, so much of the story is cut down to the point where this novel is really hard to follow. Really hard to follow if you don't read the actual book. If you haven't read the actual book before and you listen to the audiobook, you're not going to understand really much what is happening, because these old cut so much material. Like this novel could have easily been like a 12-hour to 14-hour audiobook. But that you have that much material to cut it down to 3 hours, and it's just not enough. And people who prefer, I'm just listening to my audience, telling my audience, if you prefer audiobooks over reading actual books, you're going to be lost in this novel about a lot of the stuff that you're going to like be reading about. This is one of those novels you should be reading instead if you are interested in experiencing this book. There is Leia and Han's plot. Normally, I'm more interested in Luke's plot line in Star Wars novels. But this is one of the rare exceptions where I actually prefer Han and Leia's storyline over Luke's. They both connect towards the end, but through Luke's storyline, you do have some interesting stuff. Like Luke is basically on a ship, the Eye of Palpatine, which is basically a totalitarian state. The whole thing is basically a fascist cult, pretty much. And there's like an algorithm deciding if someone's decided they're guilty, or basically, those trials like in fascist society where you're guilty no matter what. It doesn't matter the evidence. Yeah. Well, that is true. But books, not to get too off topic, like this one, like Children of the Jedi, PDFs exist. So you're never going to truly, unless the internet is completely cut off, which in that case, there's going to be ways to preserve a book like this. Now, I'm not going to say that this book is some masterpiece or anything, because it's not. But I'm just listing some things I actually enjoy about it. And I think this book was one of the first that actually explored the culture of Alderaan. Which, wait, what? What are you talking about? If there's one thing that I can't help but miss about classic Star Wars works, is how it explored cultures and how unique it made each culture feel, and how believable the politics are in this galaxy far, far away. It isn't like now where I'm just going to take a dump of the High Republic, because why not? Where either everyone is cartoonishly good or everyone's cartoonishly evil. Like there's no nuance. Like the very fact that we got deep into Alderaanian culture, which Alderaanian culture in Star Wars expanded universe materials is barely explored. And this is what I appreciate about this novel, is we actually learn about Leia's extended family. Yeah, I know they're not related, but it doesn't matter. The very fact is, we don't actually hear about Leia's extended family at all in any expanded universe work. And I'm referring to the EU. I don't know if canon does this in its own works. I'm referring to the EU. So for those of you who watch this in the future, I understand if Leia does have extended family in canon, but I'm referring to the EU. Strictly EU here. And I think this novel does a fantastic job of giving Leia something interesting to do. Like, her part of the novel is basically a thriller. Like, there's a mystery. You're trying to find out who is this mysterious person that was one of Palpatine's mistresses. And we learn also that she was, spoiler alert, one of Palpatine's Emperor's hands. For those of you who don't know, there was multiple Emperor's hands in Legends, but they didn't know about each other's existence. Now, it's not outright confirmed if her son in this novel is Palpatine's son. We don't know. But he has a force ability that allows him to control machines, which is kind of a little strange. I'm not going to lie. But then again, it's fucking Star Wars. Anyone that's going to like, oh, this is stupid. It's fucking Star Wars. This is the universe that's basically science fiction mixed with fantasy. You have freaking space whales. And amongst a bunch of other, like, weird shit. I love weird in Star Wars. I love my weird. And, of course, this novel does have a super weapon in it, obviously. Not going to lie to you, because if I'm going to sell you this novel one way or the other, I have to be honest what's contained in this. But the plot is not about the super weapon. And I think that's refreshing in an era which was overloaded with super weapons. Mind you, I love 90s expanded universe materials. I mean, I've grown to appreciate it since I've gone back to it after being completely burned out of Star Wars because of the fandom. Like, there's some really creative stuff in this era. And considering, I wish I did not skip this novel when I read the EU at the time. Because going through the New Republic era today, and as my current mindset, I actually really do appreciate some of the things this author did. She actually utilized Leia, which is probably one of the things that, let's be honest here, I'm just going to be real. I love the expanded universe, but I don't think, like, after the Phantom era, Leia is utilized that much. And I feel like Leia as a diplomat is one of those things we don't get to read about very much after the Bantam era is concluded. And Timothy Zahn, I don't even think utilizes Leia's skills as a diplomat. And this is the first novel where she's the chief of state that we actually get to read about, and we actually get to explore her mindset. And I think that is what's important in this book. Because if you're a Leia fan, I think you're going to enjoy this part of the novel. Because I think this novel did Leia justice. I think she has probably the most interesting plot line out of everyone in this book. Han shares one with Leia, but I feel like Leia is the character that steals the show in this novel. And yeah, Leia is not my favorite character. Oh, God. Sorry. The internet is fucking with me again, isn't it? All right. Okay. Anyway, now, if you're a Leia fan, I think you're going to appreciate this novel, considering I think it utilizes her well. And as I said, Leia's not my favorite character of the trio. And I can't help it, going back to these old novels, Leia was a badass in these books. I mean, holy shit. I mean, going from I mean, I'm just I can't. I'm just going on a tangent. I kind of wish I would have brought this up when I reviewed Courtship of Princess Leia. She was a badass in that book. It's like there's so many instances I could list that where Leia was pretty fucking cool, and this novel is no exception to that. And I have to bring that up simply because if I'm going to talk about one thing I love about this novel, it's Leia and how she's utilized. As the chief of state, I think it's important to give her some moral dilemma. And I can't believe I skipped this book when I was going through the EU back in 2015. I can't believe I skipped it. Because for those of you who don't know, who have not read this book, there is a point in this novel where Leia is given a choice and is tempted to utilize her executive powers of the chief of state. Because this novel also explores more about the Death Star and the designers of the Death Star and how there's a group of Alderaanians who have a list of people that designed the Death Star and they're looking to kill them, to assassinate all of them. And they would support Leia 100% if she signed in on it. That is some great material. Brilliant. And Star Wars fans just don't talk about that. And not to mention, this novel actually is one of the rare instances in the EU that actually explores the aftermath of Alderaan's destruction and Leia's psyche revolving around that, despite it being over a decade after the fact. Now, for those of you who in the comments, I'm not ignoring your chats. It's just I'm trying to keep this stream on topic. So I'm not ignoring you. I'm reading your comments. I figure I'd give a heads up. If you have any questions, ask on the next stream, because I kind of want to keep this on topic with my Star Wars reviews. Just letting you know, hold off on questions because they're good ones. What I've been seeing, your conversation's really good, but if you have any questions, ask in the next stream. I figured I'd let you know. I'm still reading it, but I'm not ignoring you. Anyway, back to the novel itself. The not so great parts about it are the parts that involve Luke. Unfortunately, as I hate to say this because I love Luke Skywalker, I do like how it explores the atmosphere of what it's like to be in a ship that's basically isolated from civilization. It's basically a cult that's automated. I do enjoy that. I appreciate the fact that Luke's storyline we actually have species that aren't utilized that much in Star Wars. Like the Jawas, the Sand People. Yeah, the Sand People are on a fucking Star Destroyer. It's like, what? What? That's a trip. I had to bring that up because those species are not featured very much in Star Wars books. Because unless the novel takes place on Tatooine, you're not going to see any Jawa characters or Tuxan Raiders. The very fact they're on the Eye of Palpatine of all things, like, what? I just can't help but point that out. That's actually really fascinating. And of course, this novel they're only in one book as far as I know. Two characters that are basically Luke's students. One of them is basically not even human anymore. His entire body has been transformed to a droid. One of them, which would have her body taken over by another character, which I will talk about in a bit, the elephant in the room, because you cannot talk about this novel without talking about Calissa. But before I talk about the elephant in the room, I'm going to talk about the writing and the characterization of the characters in this book. Because I feel like any Star Wars novel that's worth their salt I have to talk about the characters on how they are utilized. So let's talk about the writing for the characters. How do these characters feel compared to the stories that came before it? And how do they align with their characters from the original trilogy? Now, since this takes place over a decade, pretty much after the original trilogy at this point, how much do these characters feel like their movie selves compared to what we had before? I think the author did a good job of... Sorry, fucking computer. I think this novel did a good job of writing Luke, Han, and Leia. They felt like their actual selves. And it felt like the novels that preceded them, they feel like it's true to their developments. It's true to how they were in the original trilogy. And Han Solo doesn't get any significant development in this book, but Leia and Luke do. Luke is more because of the romance, but I already told how much I loved Leia's role in this book, so I don't need to talk about Leia in this portion, but I got to talk about the elephant in the room, because I think everybody who's watching this work probably want to know, who's curious anyway, who the fuck is Calissa? Who the hell is that chick? If you see the cover for Tales of the Jedi, you'll see some woman in the background. Who's Calissa? Who is this person? Wait, Luke had another love interest before Mara Jade? What are you talking about? Yeah. Luke. Oh boy. Oh boy. How am I going to talk about this? Calissa is a character that, according to this book, is basically the love of Luke's life. And honestly, as someone that's basically read all the novels, except one, obviously, where he and Mara Jade were married, it's difficult for me to believe. I don't know. Okay, I'm just going to say this. Star Wars romances are probably some of the most cliched romances you get, like, in sci-fi, in my opinion. Let's just be honest here. Like, a lot of the romances are kind of cliche. You do have some ones that aren't, but it usually follows like either like one or two or three archetypes. And Luke's romance with Calissa follows the kind of romance I'm not the biggest fan of. It's like, oh, he meets this woman. He meets the spirit of this woman who's stuck in a computer for like 30 years. And they communicate with each other. He sees glimpses of her past. He learns about her past, her homeworld, who her Jedi Master was. Then she looks into his past and vice versa. And it's like, I don't know how much time passed while they were on the ship, but they fell in love. Okay, I'm not going to hold it against Star Wars. I mean, I'm pretty sure the romance could have worked had the authors gave a shit and didn't just, oh my God, fans do not like this character. Let's write her out of the story. I mean, honestly, I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan of this romance, and because, in fact, to be real with you, a good example of a romance in Star Wars is Revan and Bastila, which, of course, their romance follows the archetypal of romance that is very popular and has one of the most popular kind is enemies to lovers. That's basically a trope. For those of you who don't know what archetype I'm talking about. It's also rivals could also apply in this instance. And I think the best romance, at least in Legends, is Luke and Mora Jade. I'll get into that later because it's a slow burn. Because their romance doesn't start off on the most positive note, and theirs would fall into the enemies to lovers trope. And I just felt like Kalissa just appears, and not to mention, considering the romance doesn't last for more than a few novels before it's completely like forgotten, pretty much. Yeah, it's mentioned here and there in some novels like Vision of the Future and one of the Fate of the Jedi books. But the very fact that this romance just doesn't really have that much of an impact outside this trilogy, I don't think Kalissa herself is a bad character. I just think her character just would have been so much better if one of the biggest defining traits of her character wasn't that she was Luke's romantic interest. Because I feel like her character was explored better in other novels, such as Order 66 and No More Prisoners. I just think other authors I think it's Karen Traviss. Now that I think about it, I think Karen Traviss did a better job exploring this character. And I feel like this character, one of her most defining traits that she's remembered for is being one of Luke's love interests in this. And it's just, I'm not going to say, oh yeah, her inhibiting the body of one of Luke's students, that's stupid. That's like necrophilia. It's like, what the fuck? I think had this romance given the chance to grow, and the authors did not give it. I can't prove this, but it seemed like the fans didn't like this romance at all, and they just abandoned it early on. I don't know. It just seems so. I don't know. I guess I can approach this as after the fact, like decades after the fact, where we've had multiple novels that basically had Luke and Mora Jade, and I got to read them as a before they're married and after they're married, and I just think their romance works so well. It's not cliche like most Star Wars romances are, and I just feel like this is not my favorite romance, actually. I'm just not a fan of it. It's probably the least favorite aspect of this book is the romance between Luke and Kalissa, simply because I just feel like it just doesn't go anywhere. And that's another reason why I just, it's not my thing. I know there's Star Wars fans that enjoyed this romance, that preferred Kalissa with Luke over Mora. Don't understand why. I think it had the authors not abandon this character as soon as things got inconvenient because fans preferred Luke with Mora. I think you could have made Mora and Luke's relationship work. Luke, you probably have people that wouldn't mind this pairing. But as it stands now, since we can't talk about what could have been, we're talking about what stands now. And yes, it is a better love story than Twilight. They gave up on this early. If you're wondering what I'm talking about, I will probably elaborate on this when I talk about the sequel, Darksaber. Kalissa, towards the end of this novel, which it's revealed in the final chapter, she lost her connection to the Force. And she doesn't feel whole. Now, in my opinion, this would have been a good plot point. This could have been a good way of developing the relationship further. There was a good storyline set up right here at the end of this novel. But the fact remains is They didn't commit to this storyline of her losing her connection to the Force and her regaining her connection to the Force. Now, that there is a potential of a good story there. Now, I'm praising the concepts that the author set up. We cannot talk about what could have been or what should have been, because the story has been over for like almost 2 decades at this point for this novel. I'm just pointing out things that the author had already set up that was basically disregarded a few novels later. I don't think Star Wars novels, I don't think Star Wars romance sucks. I disagree on that. The only if you've been exposed to a handful of Star Wars materials, yes, it sucks. But there actually is good relationships. It's just, if we're going by the films themselves, oh boy. Like, Han and Leia's relationship is, I'm just be honest, I do like the chemistry, and the dialogue can be kind of funny at times. It is a little cringy at times, but then again, it's Star Wars. I think Han and Leia probably, if we're going by the movies strictly, probably had the best romance, because I think, let's be honest, the dialogue in the prequels was kind of, regarding the romance, was kind of shit. I love the prequels, but it's the truth. Yes, if we're going by the movies, yes. But if we're going by the novels themselves and the TV shows, no. Now, I'm getting close to the conclusion. For those of you who got here a little late, again, I didn't intend for this review to, I didn't intend this review to go on for longer than around 30-something minutes, simply because I'm talking about one book. If I was talking about a trilogy, this would go on longer. But the reason why I'm doing one book, because I'm basically seeing how long can I discuss a novel, a single novel, for an extended period of time. Now, Children of the Jedi, this book, should you read it? Should you give it a shot? For those of you who want to check out the audiobook, don't. For those of you who came in later, don't. The audiobook, you'll just miss out on 90% of the story. You'll be completely lost. You will not know what the hell's going on. And some of the most interesting things I told you about in this novel, you're not going to learn if you listen to the audiobook. So, if you want to experience this book, I'll be honest with you, I already told you, if you want to pirate this book and you want to read it some other way, I'm not going to hold it against you, because to me, if you want to read Star Wars novels, at least in the EU, but you don't have the money to buy them, you have PDFs. They exist. You could basically find them on a drop of a hat. But is it one of those stories that is a must-have, that you must read, that you cannot possibly do without? In my opinion, as an EU fan, this novel is not essential. I think you could skip this novel if you wish. If you're not interested, this novel doesn't sound appealing by listening to what I told you. All of us, as Star Wars fans, have our own things that interest us. There's multiple things that interest me in Star Wars. I like the politics. I like the geopolitics. I like the stuff involving the Force. I like the military sci-fi aspect of Star Wars as well. I like stories that actually expand the universe in ways that haven't been done before. And this story fills in those needs for me. Now, the author, also, her writing style may not be your cup of tea. It depends if you've just read a sample of this novel. My recommendation is only read this book if you want more material and you're a Leia fan and you want to read a good story featuring Leia that utilizes her skill set that is barely utilized outside of 90s novels. If you're not the biggest fan of Leia, I would just skip this book. It isn't bad, but it's not a novel that everyone's going to enjoy. And if romance is not something you're the biggest fan of in Star Wars, that's another reason I would encourage you to skip it. As for the rating I would give this book, I think it's a good story, despite its problems that I discussed in this review. And take everything I said with a grain of salt. If you want to check it out for yourself, don't take my word for it. Judge for yourself if this novel is truly worth your time. For those of you who showed up here, thank you. I'm sorry for the delay. I hope it doesn't happen again. For the next stream, it's going to be something where I'll have the freedom more to discuss different sets of topics. That's been delayed up to high hell all month because I haven't felt very good. So, yeah. You know what? The date I have set currently is only a placeholder. Sorry, a placeholder. Tomorrow, I'm going to do a stream. And you know what? Fuck it. Let's just... Any questions that you have right now, save them for tomorrow. I'll see you then. Anyway, this review is over. May the Force be with you. And as always, see you guys next time.